Hello everyone, I'm sitting on the ground. I have a little bit of an issue in my game right now. Being the empath that I am, I'm a little bit worried about Bruce's mental state. I think that he could possibly be depressed. And I'm sure you guys share this feeling too, because as we all know, the only place happiness can come from is material possessions.
Okay.
And Bruce just doesn't have any, so there's no way he could be living a fulfilling life. I personally will not stand for this, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands and put some items into my game. The plan is to eventually have a bunch of different types of items, so I'm going to reorganize my code a little bit to make better use of that class hierarchy system. Last time I siphoned a good chunk of my methods from my player class into my character class, and I'm going to do the same thing again, except this time I'm going to take all of the collision and physics methods from the character class and put it into a new physics object class. Now that I have all of my physics readily available, I can make my base class for items. Call that basic item.
Wow.
Every item also gets a value, and that'll be useful later. Wow, that was boring. Sorry about that. Let's make the basic item do something interesting now. That's a rock. I'm gonna put that rock into my basic item animator. Now, my rock should inherit physics, except the thing about inheritance is you still have to set up the class correctly with all of the right variables, so this did actually take a couple tries. One thing of note, I did override the character interaction method in the basic item class, because don't get me wrong, I like a little bit of footy as much as the next guy, but not for this game. So I changed it to do absolutely nothing. More on that later. Another thing of note, when I made my collision system, I only used square hitboxes, or rectangular hitboxes, I suppose. But this rock is clearly meant to be circular. So now I have the dilemma of, should I spend the time to go back and make circular collisions?
Maybe.
Now, I was having a hard time making a decision, so I decided to call up one of my good personal friends that I hang out with frequently for advice. Hello? He said no. So the game has rocks. That's great, but it's not doing anything for Bruce's mental health yet. I need to let him actually pick them up. But before I give Bruce any sort of inventory system or pickup mechanic, I put text above the rocks, because it's my development process and I'll do things in any order that I like. But that looks like shit. What if instead I made it look sexy? Okay, we can do an item system now. So I went ahead and added an array list of basic items to the player class. And it's done. No further questions on the inventory system. Finally, everything is in place to actually make a pickup system. Here's how it works. The items are already keeping track of when they're in range of the player, so they actually just tell the player, and then the player calculates the closest item of those that are in range and moves it from the world into its inventory. I know.
Why did you make the inventory system so sophisticated? How are we ever gonna learn how to use it properly?
Jokes. But I bet if Bruce had a face, he would have a big old grin right now as the proud owner of a rock. That theoretical grin could be bigger though. What is the only thing that is scientifically proven to make people happier than material possessions? Violence. Bruce wants to throw the items that he's collected. So I'll add input to the R key, and when it's pressed, I'll remove a random item from the inventory and add it back to the game world. Then I'll give that object some velocity, and that makes a projectile. The only slight issue with that system is that it sucks. So I wrote a method to get the position of the cursor, and instead of just throwing the object straight forward, I throw it in the direction of the cursor. Being able to aim is nice, but the only slight issue with that system is that I hate it. So I wrote a trajectory calculation to find an arc that goes through the cursor, or at least one that gets closest to the cursor. I know that sounds complicated, and trust me, it's more complicated in practice. The hard part is that velocity in both directions is changing over time, so I can't calculate an arc that goes through the point. I have to find an arc that goes through the point. So without getting too technical, I just calculate a bunch of arcs and then find which one gets closest to the target point, which in this case is the cursor, and use that one. This was another unnecessary abomination. And was it worth it? Well, it's kind of hard to say that anything has been worth it since I decided to build my own physics engine instead of just using Unity. Back in the basic item class, this is when I make my return to the character interaction method. I made a new projectile state for the basic items, which they will be put into when they're thrown. In the projectile state, when they make contact with a character, they'll actually hit the character and deal damage based on weight and speed. This did come with the side effect of instantly damaging the player whenever they throw an item, so I made an invincibility system where the item can't deal damage to the player for a second when they throw it, and then I also give temporary invincibility to characters that get hit so they can't register multiple hits, double up on damage. While an item is in projectile mode, I also made them bounce off of things just by reversing the velocity in the direction of the collision by a fraction of the speed. This is great because now the player can hit ricochet shots, and if they miss by just a little bit, the item will probably bounce into their target anyway. So that's all great. The only slight issues that I have with this entire throwing system are that it makes no sense and it looks like shit. So I have a vision for what I want the throwing mechanic to look and feel like, but unfortunately it would require altering the fundamental animation system, and that is just so much work. Luckily for present me, past me locked the fuck in and knocked it out. The change that I needed to make was changing every sprite from one sprite to multiple sprites, and I'll show you why in a second. Now, I know that doesn't really sound like a big change, but for perspective, I took notes and drew up a schema and made a list of everything I had to do in the order I was going to do it in before I started this. It takes an unprecedented level of daunting for a task to get me to actually follow a proper development procedure instead of just going ham slice off the dome.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
So anyway, here's all the classes that I had to rework to some capacity. On top of that, I have to split a bunch of my animations into multiple animations. I only did this for a few new animations that I just made right now, but trust me, there will be a lot more of this in the future and it is super tedious. But when it's all said and done, just look at that result. Now, if you didn't catch it right away, the purpose of splitting up my animations into multiple sprites is so that I can have different sprites on different layers. As you can see, this rock is actually sitting on the layer between Bruce's hands. That's it. I did the entire rework just for that. Oh yeah, now instead of throwing the items, Bruce just takes them out of his inventory and holds onto them. Also, I'm changing from the R key to the V key just because I like it better. I'm gonna add throwing back into the game, but first I have to finish adding all these animations. To make sure that the item stays in the right spot while it's being held, I'm actually keeping track of the point in relation to the player in that new player animation system that I made. Okay, now to add throwing back into the game. Luckily for me, I already made the throwing mechanic and I can reuse that. I just have to figure out when I'm gonna actually call it. So if the player left clicks and they're holding an item, they'll throw it. If they're not holding an item, then they'll use their light attack. And then if they right click and they're holding an item, nothing happens. And if they're not holding an item, they'll use the heavy attack. This leaves an opportunity to have a different type of throw or a different use for an item on the right click, but I didn't have any spectacular ideas. So if you guys have anything that you would like to see happen on that right click, just let me know. So Bruce can finally collect items and use them for violence, so he must be much happier. I'm still not quite done though. I know we established earlier that I'm not going to be implementing circular hitboxes, but that won't stop me from faking it. So I'm finally going to use that rotation parameter that I put in the game object way back when I first made it. I made items rotate while they're moving, sort of randomly when they're in the air, and at the same speed that they're moving when they're on the ground. There's no practical application, I just think it looks nice. Another thing, I'm not really sure where Bruce has been hiding all of these items.
Whole bag of jelly beans up my ass.
But it only makes sense to give him a backpack to carry all of his new stuff. Also, I'm gonna diversify the item pool. So I drew up some gemstones and I added them to the game, which is really easy because all I have to do is make a new class which extends the basic item class and then set the animation, the weight, and the value for each one. And here's a piñata. Now I'm done. Quick appreciation to everybody who is subscribed. After the last video, the channel is sitting at 450 subscribers, which means that we get 450 milliseconds of subscriber dance party starting right now. Make sure to subscribe so you can get in on the next subscriber dance party, and so you can stay up to date on the project. If you're still watching, go ahead and drop a like too. I have some other item-based mechanics that I'm going to be working on in the future, but until then, I'll see you next time.